We have an expansive topic to work through, not much time to get through the key issues. So I'll keep introductions brief to allow for Q&A and discussion. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by a very strong panel with representatives from the gas and power networks, the consumer sector, and from the technology sector. We have with us this afternoon Maxine Frerk from Grid Edge Energy, Jonathan Collins from Cadent, Tim Harwood from Northern Gas Networks, Dr. Usman Bagadou from National Grid ESO, and Ian Cameron from UK Power Networks. I'll kick us off now with a couple of opening questions for discussion, and then the plan is we will swiftly move to questions from the audience. If you can post your questions in the chat box, I believe Danielle will be forwarding these through to me, and we'll do our very best to get through as many as we can in the time we have available. So first up, just a quick warm-up question for the panel. I wanted to put a broad question to our panellists today based on the 6 carbon budget advice that's been published by the CCC. The CCC's put forward a number of notable policies and recommendations in its advice, and they include a requirement for all new boilers sold to be hydrogen ready from 2025, a target for 1 million heat pumps to be installed annually by 2030, and a ban on boiler-only sales in 2033, except in areas which we expect to transition to hydrogen. So my question is, how do we begin to plan as an industry what heat technologies will be deployed where? So, nice and easy. So Tim, can I turn to you first? If we could keep observations relatively brief, albeit it's a difficult question, so we can get around the entire panel, and then we can move on to one more question after that.
Yeah, no problem.
To you, Tim.
Thanks, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone. I think I'll pick up the point about the boilers, if that's okay.
Sure.
So we're already trialling a couple of hydrogen boilers in our high street at Spade Adam Test Centre. Within the next 6 to 12 months, there'll be a whole range of hydrogen appliances that will be approved for use in the marketplace. So, you know, the ambitious target of getting everything up and running by 2023 is okay. I think the industry is ready. We do need the government to be able to mandate hydrogen-ready appliances. The manufacturers are on the, as I said, on the cusp of being able to get these type approved, but they won't move into mass production until the government sort of presses the button on mandating them. The great thing about hydrogen-ready appliances is that you can install them in your house and they run on natural gas. When you come to do any conversion later down the line, you just need to replace a few small parts for a very cheap cost, probably 30 minutes to an hour's work. And that's against changing the appliance over for a brand new one at the time of conversion. So being able to mandate hydrogen-ready appliances is really going to stimulate the market. It's going to enable us to get a lot of customers on hydrogen-ready equipment before we do any conversions, and it will be a bit like the digital TV switchover if we are really successful with that, in that people won't notice that they've got this new equipment in their homes, and when the time comes, it'll be a relatively simple process to switch it over. So the answer to the question really is that the market is ready, and we're just waiting for the government to do a mandate.
Thank you, Tim. I'll turn to Usman, because I know, Usman, your job is to look at future energy scenarios, which is really important work, and you'll think about this in the round and potentially regionally as well. So any observations from your side, Usman?
Yeah, I mean, the release from CCC really sort of clarifies, you know, what needs to be done. I think, as Tim says, just by getting it done, I think the market is ready, but it needs a coordinated approach. So we know that, you know, there will be different technologies that will need to play a role in sort of moving us to that sort of net zero target. Hydrogen has been mentioned, heat pumps have been mentioned, but also there are things like district heat that allows us to combine all the different benefits from all these different technologies to make sure that we have the optimum solutions for consumers. But also, as we really move, you know, onto this journey, we need to sort of make sure it's coordinated. So, for example, there might need to be new standards for how heat pumps are installed, for example. We know that heat pumps are quite good in normal conditions, but I think there is a concern that when you leave people to basically fend for themselves in terms of how heat pumps are designed, you could end up with unintended consequences to the grid, for example. So having that whole system approach to how this transition actually gets implemented is absolutely important.
Thank you, Usman. Can I turn to Ian from UKPN?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. That's interesting. I think the way I thought about this was, and this is from the Prime Minister's 10-point plan of 600,000 heat pumps, a year. I thought to myself, well, how do we achieve that, right? And then the carbon budget's not far different, up to 1 million by the end of the decade. And what we see in our distribution future energy scenarios is we're roughly a third. Our distribution network covers probably roughly a third of anything in terms of load, population, etc. of the UK. And that, if you just break that down, if you say you're looking for 200,000 on our network in a year in terms of heat pumps, you've got to start somewhere, right? And the way we start that is not with those that are on gas grid at the moment, because we've got bigger challenges that we've got to try and work out. And the carbon budget's a good step in the right direction to try and signal the market of where we should go. But the way we'd achieve that is you start looking at places that you have very low regrets. Your off gas grid communities now that are burning fossil fuels today. We should be starting on things like that now. And we believe we have about 450,000 homes across our patch, our 8.3 million customers that are in that situation. So you could say over a 5-year period of our next price control, that's roughly 90,000 a year of your 200 that we need to try and contribute on our networks. That's 90. New builds, we connect about 100,000 new customers a year. So if we get them connected under the new builds, under the future home standard, there's another 100,000. So you've got 190,000 now. And then you start to say, well, actually, there's some early adopters that will want to just move faster and maybe want to go for some form of heat pump that maybe are already on the connected to the gas grid. 10,000 doesn't seem unreasonable. So the first thing was, it sounds reasonable and it sounds achievable. Turn that into power. It's not a huge amount. If we took 1 million customers off in the next decade, onto electricity, that's roughly about 20% increase across our demand at peak specifically. And so when you talk about whole systems, that's the key, is that peak time. If you can tie those vectors, and I think that's where the trick is going to lie on hybridization. Some really interesting things in there about hydrogen and electricity hybridization. So as we go through, Paul, I'd love to talk a bit more about some of the projects we're doing with other gas networks, etc., to try and probably break down some of these challenges in bite sizes so that we know where we should start cracking on and those things that we should probably start doing a bit more work on.
No, thanks, Ian. Really helpful. It's good to bring out the points, I think, around hybridization and also probably flexibilities in there to a degree as well, isn't it? Hopefully things we can talk about a little bit more. Maxine, could I turn to you, hoping the technology is working your side now? Not sure if we've still got Maxine with us. I'll turn to Jonathan in the hope that Maxine will pop back up. Jonathan.
No problem. Thanks. I think, looking at the carbon budget that came out today, it is a good document where, I think what it looks at and that target around heat pumps is interesting. I think at Cadent, we take, like Usman said, a whole system approach. I think what's going to get us to 2050 is, in all likelihood, a ramp up of all of these technologies. So utilization of hydrogen in the gas network, utilization of the electricity network, and then utilization of heat pumps as well. I think when you look at the UK makeup, there's 24 million homes across the UK. A lot of the majority of those are sort of poorly insulated. So when you look at heat pumps, you've got to be able to make sure that option is the right option for the household. So I think when you look at it from a consumer point of view, we've really got to be cognizant of the fact that the best technology option has to be available for all consumers, and they need to be able to choose what's going to happen. So I think, it's helpful. The mandating of hydrogen boilers is something that we, Cadent, have been calling for a while, because, as Tim said, it's really going to stimulate that market. I think when we've looked into it, you're looking at about 1.3 million boiler replacements per year. So over the next 10 years, you would be looking at sort of 30 million just through general replacement. So that's that gets us in a really good position for net zero. But overall, I think really, I think the gas network, I think the electricity network are national assets, and they should be utilised as such. So when we're looking at these options, it should be a whole system approach, and all of these options should be looking at, and then allowing householders to pick which option is going to be best suited and most economical for them going forward.
Thank you, Jonathan. I can't see Maxine's reappeared on my screen. Maxine, if you are back, please shout. If not, I think, Jonathan, you gave us a good segue into a sort of second opening question, actually, which is around the customer and the consumer sort of experience in all of this. So my next question before moving to sort of Q&A is broadly around how we engage households. So I think the next step in heat decarbonisation really does require us to engage individuals and households, and the CCC identified that behavioural change in particular is quite an important component of this, and particularly in heating. So my question really is, how do we take people with us on this journey? And I know we've just finished with you, Jonathan, but you sort of touched on it. So can I come back to you just to take us through that?
Absolutely. I think this is a really key point, and that's really going to have to be developed over the coming years. I think there's different options that we can look at engaging householders. I think a national campaign similar to what we've seen around the rollout for digital TV could be one option. I think one thing that we could look at sort of immediately would be the language that we use. So something that Caden has been really keen to push is this idea that it's not a banning of gas boilers, it's the banning of the fuel, that the banning of the fossil fuel gas boilers. Because I think what we don't want to do is make people think that they are going to lose their boiler. And I think it's really important that language at this point of the transition, a really important point of the transition, is considered. Because like I say, what we don't want, I've been on phone calls with local authorities where they think that boilers are going to get ripped out come 2025, and that's not the case. So we're really cognizant of our language. So we talk about the phasing out of fossil fuel boilers and the phasing in of hydrogen-ready boilers. That's one point. The second point would be, so a piece of work that we recently conducted in collaboration with our distribution network operator in the Northwest, Electricity Northwest, was a piece of work that looked at pathways to hitting the Greater Manchester Combined Area 2038 net zero target. And that looked at the whole system approach. And what it said was, over the next sort of 15 years, chunked into 5 years, these are what the interventions that you need to be doing in order to hit that target. And one of them was consumer engagement. But what that kind of staggered approach and sort of, laying out those interventions that are required from both a gas and an electricity point of view allows the local authority to do is plan more effectively, so that they can see if we're saying that by 2025, hydrogen will be coming into their network through the HyNet project that we're working on in the Northwest, that they can then start to plan effectively for what's going to be required and when. So that consumer engagement piece is really important. But it's really important that the bodies that are going to sort of implement these changes are aware of when the technology changes are going to happen and when those sort of intervention points are, that they can plan when they need to go out to customers, and then they can plan sort of that engagement side. I think I think there is going to have to be a national campaign around the technologies. I think you see it more, when people are more au fait now with sort of electric cars and the charging point. And I think that hydrogen debate is coming along. So I think, ramping up the sort of the discussion around all of these technologies over the next sort of 12, 18 months is going to be really key for the long-term success of hitting net zero.
No, thanks, Johnson. Really good points there, particularly around language, where I think there's lots of scope for confusion, and actually around choice, ensuring there's a level playing field for all technologies that are out there, including hybrid systems, where I think BEIS have been vacillated on hybrids now for a long time. And we see with the CCC report today some clear direction that actually there's sort of strong synergies potentially with hydrogen there as well. And I think also the flexibility side to the electrification element of this, actually getting on with some of the wider reforms and allowing the customer value propositions to come through is certainly something I think we see as an opportunity. still don't have Maxine, so on this one I'll get back round the final panel members, and we are starting to get a couple of questions come in, so we can then revert to the Q&A side. Ian, can I go back to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Jonathan makes a great point, right? What I took away from what Jonathan was saying there was, is Avengers Assemble is what I'm hearing, right? Where he and his local distribution network got together. But I want to extend those Avengers, right? I think there's, if you want customers to change, you need the right environment, incentives, and needs for them. So if you're thinking about on the left, you've got your gas Avenger, you've got your electricity Avenger, you've got your local authority or third-party intermediary, because they got a big role to play in bringing that community along with them. There's central government, and I see them probably more in a some form of an incentive Avenger that needs to come along. But what I'm trying to get to is you're going to have to agree what that plan is for that community, and then we all got to get behind it and deliver that plan. And I think that writing needs to get on the wall quicker, because if you could just argue off gas grid has been low hanging fruit for a long time, right? But we still talk a lot about hydrogen because it's the majority of people on gas, and I get that, but we've got to start to crack on, right? We almost got to get the Avengers. Let's start to suit up. What does suit up look like to me? Get the costume set up. You've got to practice a bit. Start on those low-hanging fruits, and the work we've done with Cadent, etc. We got a project with Wales and West and Scottish and Southern Energy Networks. In also, again, what does the Avengers Assemble look like? It's called Green City Vision. Exactly that. What does that pathway look like? And can we all agree? In that case, that's almost that's the pathway we should follow. I think that helps with that's just networks talking networks, right? You've got to bring all the other actors and Avengers in, and let's have that common discussion. So that's how you get customers to be flexible, is buy in, but you all got to sing the same tune.
No, thanks. That's a really nice way of putting it. Get people motivated. Usman or Tim, anything you'd like to add to that ahead of us going to questions?
I'd agree with what Jonathan and Ian said. I think we're working on a customer value proposition for the potential hydrogen trials that we're going to be starting in the next couple of years. In our part of the world, we work with Northern Power Grid, and we fully intend to be able to go and actually stand on the doorstep together with some sort of a brochure or something saying, look, you have the right to be able to opt out of this trial if you want. You don't have to have hydrogen. Maybe you've got reservations, or you just want to change. We have to really make sure that people don't get left behind. So, what alternatives are we going to offer to people? And as part of the trials, we've made a commitment that anybody who doesn't want to be part of the trial, we'll offer them an electric alternative and fit it for them and help them and assist them with it, because it is all about the sort of language that you use, the way you talk to people and announce yourself on social media. But also, there's nothing better than actually walking down the street together and people can see you, that you actually do offer choice, and that it's not a competition. So I completely agree. It's got to be a whole systems thing. But right at the sharp end, when the customer is there on the doorstep, you must be able to offer choice and make sure that no one gets left behind. And that's one of the key directives we've had from BEIS when we're considering doing hydrogen trials, is some people might not want to take part. What are you going to do? And I think it's a great question. And, we have to answer that in a strong way, and we have to offer alternatives. And we're quite happy to work with Northern Power Grid for them to say, you can have an all-electric solution if you want. That's great, because at the end of the day, what we want is pleased customers more than anything else. And we want the trial to work, and we don't want people to have any negative views. If they don't want to take part, that's absolutely fine. We'll make sure that they're not inconvenienced.
Thanks very much, Tim. Okay, well, I'll turn this on to the questions which have come in now. I think I've got 4 or 5 have come through. Hopefully we'll be able to get through those, but if anybody else wants to submit another one, please do. So I'll take them in the order in which they were submitted. So the first question's around heat pump take-up, which has historically been low despite the availability of subsidies. How do the panel see us reaching the installation numbers mentioned by the 10-point plan of the CCC numbers? I think that's a really good question. I'll offer a couple of quick thoughts. So we as a business currently work with the domestic RHI, and it's difficult policy to work with. It's long. There are many customer touch points. We have to use heat pump calc data and heat loss calc data, which often doesn't reflect the customer home. And we lose a lot of customers across the sort of recruitment process because of that. So simpler policy design, I think, is critical. And we're moving now from what appears to be sort of the RHI tariff model through to grant models. And I think that works a lot better in the market. And as some of the other panelists have said, actually getting on with the segments which have been low-hanging fruit for some time is also very sensible. So off-grid, I think you've got about 60,000 replacement oil boilers conducted there annually. And obviously new build, where you've got upwards of 200,000 homes a year. So if you move the policies forward to target both of those, I think you'd start to make a big dent in the heat pump target number, certainly. So that's my 2 pennies worth. Usman, thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think you probably hit all the nails on the head there. But I think the other key component of that is the reliability of the existing heating systems. So I think customers want to be, they want to know that, their new heat systems are as reliable as their old ones. But I think there's a challenge to the manufacturers and installers to make sure that, we're sort of building that confidence in, what we're delivering. I think that goes back into the messaging aspect of this, and also into the buying aspect. People want to be guaranteed of reliability, but obviously cost is a huge part of this. I think there's been recent development in that direction, but we might probably need a bit more support for consumers, especially the vulnerable consumers, to really sort of enable them and support them to move on to this new transition.
Would anyone else like to come on this? Ian, I know this is a heat pump question, and you're on the power side for us. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. I spoke earlier in the session of how I believe we deliver, 200,000 a year, which is, you need a little bit more than that to hit the million a year, but that'll get us a good start. I think the way you top up to the million is agreeing those areas, and what we're probably not as great at as networks doing is saying, actually, our gas colleagues, where's your network old, in need of repair, and maybe ours are strong? Then we should make some decisions around those areas, and vice versa, where we've got strand networks and they're long and they don't make sense. Then we should say, actually, this should be going hydrogen, right? Put our money where our mouth is there, all of us. And I think that's how you start to swing. You go with those communities and you make those strategic decisions, and you all agree to that and you get on with it. I think how you create that, I don't know the answer. We can feel the workings of those as we get into the price control periods and planning for them, where we really get close together to understand what each other's plans are going to look like forward. But I do feel we start to drift apart a little bit thereafter. We come together at planning, ready for settlement in a way. What we need to be getting is that funnel. We're getting embedded almost as one in that community, because we all support the same customers at the end of the day. It's how do we unlock that last bit, in my view. But the rest is off gas grid new builds. You're 3/4 of the way there in the next decade at least. It's starting to get our head in the game of what does that mean after the next decade, because that's where the hard bit comes. If we haven't solved and got the hydrogen debate sorted, we've got some challenges in terms of deliverability. So the quicker we start to make those decisions as a society, the better. And we haven't got 10 years, in my opinion. We've maybe got 5.
Thanks, Ian. Did anyone else want to jump in off the back of that, Tim or Jonathan? If not, I'll move us on to our next question.
I think just very quickly, I think it goes back to that whole system approach. I think, absolutely, previous comments are right. We need to work together as different industries to look at the different solutions and move forward with that. So rather than sort of pitting technology against technology, it's working together holistically and say, well, these are what the options are, and this is where what's going to work best, and allowing that consumer choice to sort of move forward. I think that's when you would then start to see sort of a ramp up of the technology, because people would say that it wasn't in competition, it was more about working together collaboratively and using that whole system approach model in order to hit the target.
And I'd just say briefly, I would agree with all that, and that if heat pumps want to become more mainstream, and accepted by the public, they need to be installed, and people need to think that this is not a new technology, it's a business as usual thing. So the way to do that is to install them. I completely agree. We've got to start somewhere.
Thanks, Tim. I'm just moving us on. We've had a few more questions coming, so I'm trying to make sure that those people who have asked a question, some have asked multiple questions, we can at least get one question answered per person that's asked them. So I'm just scanning down. We've got one other here about hydrogen in homes uncovering unforeseen costs. So significant in-building piping upgrades and who should pay for that. Tim, you're on the screen. I see as a good candidate to answer that question.
Well, we're doing a lot of research at the moment on sort of whether we need to upgrade any pipework within houses, and also the services and mains and pipes that are outside the houses. We probably will need to do some reinforcement, but then with the electricity networks, the gas networks and the water, all the utilities are replacing their assets on a regular basis, and there are programs of work to do that. We don't feel that we need to do too much reinforcement at a customer level. I think as you get higher up the chain to the transmission side, we're going to need a lot more storage. We're going to need a lot more resilience on the system so that we can keep supplying hydrogen in times of peak demand. But yeah, there will be potentially a little bit more reinforcement of the network and upgrade of the network, but the costs are quite small. I think to do all the programme of work, and we probably won't need to do it, I think it's something like £1.50 per person per year, something like that. So, you know, less than half a cup of coffee or something like that. So, yeah, it's not a great deal, but it's a fair question. There will obviously have to be changes to the network, because the way that natural gas comes into the country is going to be different when hydrogen comes on board. It'll be produced in different places. So there will need to be some changes.
Thanks, Tim. Jonathan, I can see you leaning in, wanting to go next. So I'll turn to you.
Thank you. No, I just think, you know, as Tim said, there's obviously a program of work going on where we're upgrading our gas mains. So, you know, in the northwest over our patch, approximately 70% of the network is sort of now plastic. And obviously we're from the final 30%. But you know, another thing that Caden did earlier this year, we issued the UK's first transition bond. So that was the sort of a transition bond, a 12-year euro 500 million bond, and that was to invest in the retrofit of the gas networks. And that showed, it was hugely oversubscribed, because that showed from a private investment point of view, businesses are starting to see the advantage of investing in these technologies and investing in not only the assets but also the potential of the assets. So I think there are different funding mechanisms available that we could look at. But you know, I think it's as we see sort of the development of the technology, then you'll see sort of the rollout of what will be required and how that will be funded going forward.
Thanks, Jonathan. Well, I think we've got time for one more question, and I think we would have got round certainly 3 of the 4 people who have been posing questions in the chat. I think this is a good one. It links back to what we've been talking about in terms of off-gas grid. So the question is, typically more off-gas customers are seen in rural areas with weak electricity networks and poor transport links. Who will be responsible to pay for the required network upgrades? So it's a really good question, given off-gas is one of those sectors we've been talking about as a sort of go early. We do offer quick thought, quite a bit of work with off-gas currently. And what we do is hybridisation. And I think that's probably a big chunk of the answer for off-gas. So that can involve an LPG and a lower capacity air source heat pump tank solution, or a bio-LPG tank solution and an air source heat pump. So that gets you to net zero pretty quickly. What that means is you've got a smaller capacity heat pump in the home to help preserve probably network integrity in the rural areas, whilst giving you flexibility for the homes off-grid, which are sort of larger and harder to decarbonise. So that's the perspective we have. Ian, is there a UKPN thought on this one?
Yeah, there is to a degree. Who's going to pay? The bill payer will pay, I think, at the end of the day. the networks, I wouldn't say are as weak as probably one would think. What the challenge we have is, obviously a lot of them are overhead networks in rural communities, and when they were designed, they were only pulled in with 2 wires for single phase instead of having 3 wires for 3 phase. So there's some easy wins and some really quick wins where you just pull another phase in and you can unlock a substantial amount of capacity for that community then. And if you consider, electrical heating, electrical load on a heat pump is maybe 3, 4, at max 5 kilowatts. It's not a huge amount, right? It's less than an electric vehicle. The challenge is that flexibility, and you talk about flexibility in a different way there, Paul. You talk about actually at high need time, boost times, you actually go to a different option. My version of that is slightly different. You boost outside of peak to tide you through peak, and then you boost. So you almost prepare yourself, and that just becomes smart systems do that. And I think that's how we get there. Is we take strategic decisions. If that community is going to go, we go in with our Avengers and we sort it out. If I need to pull another phase in, I pull a phase in. If there's something to be done via behavior, then we bring in the community partners who do that. I think that's how we unlock it. But I'm not concerned on the off gas grid. 450,000 customers. We need to transition away from fossil fuels there. I'm not concerned with the load or the network challenges there. They are minuscule and they'll probably fit into one price control at the level of reinforcement we normally do in a price control for new load anyway. So
that's reassured me. I've just been given a timing warning from Danielle, who's ensuring we don't run over. I'll start to wrap us up then, because I think we're bang on time. But what strikes me from this conversation and what struck me from the 6th carbon budget this morning is just the tenor of all of this now is basically get on with it. I think it's what Lord Deben's been saying as well. And there's actually a section of the report in the CCC that says getting on with it. And we're having really practical level conversations around, well, how do we hit the numbers? What segments we're going after? What level of reinforcement would be required? How could we work together to coordinate? How do we ensure the customers have the best possible experience and we've got the right standards in place? All really important things. And I sincerely hope that the heat and building strategy, when that emerges, and it needs to emerge soon, starts to give us the policy and the regulation we need to start to get on with it. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm sorry if that's run over slightly, but I think we can wrap up there.
Good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.